Get ready to listen, learn, and earn CE hours. This podcast features content from an accredited CE activity provided by Colibri Healthcare. Visit elitelearning.com/podcasts for accreditation and disclosure statements and instructions on how you may be able to earn CE credits.
Welcome back to the final episode in our series where healthcare and legal meet. I am Dr. Candace Pierce with Colibri Healthcare, and joining me for this final episode is Dr. Margaret Carno and Dr. James Stowe. If you have missed any of the episodes in this series, here's a quick recap of the topics. In episode 1, we focused on understanding negligence and acknowledgement of a mistake. Episode 2, we discussed culture and detailed the effect that may be felt in healthcare due to the fears of repercussion when mistakes happen. In this last episode, we're going to focus on how to move forward. Now, in that Tennessee trial, going back to talk about the verdict, it was brought up that nurses are the final check for errors for pharmacists and physicians. Isn't that a heavier load for the nursing profession to carry? As in, will nurses be held accountable and responsible for mistakes made by the pharmacists and the physicians when technically it's out of the nurse's scope of practice to prescribe?
I think there's a couple of issues there. And I'll be honest, my background is pediatrics, as I stated before. So the nurses always double check the calculations for the physicians. So with the order, when the order got sent down, we always double checked them, and then the pharmacy double checked them. I think that it comes down to how the medication, for lack of a better term, is made up. So if you receive a mini bag, a small bag of fluid, and it says it has 20 milliequivalents of potassium in it, and to administer over an hour, hour and a half, you have to trust that the pharmacy mixed it up correctly.
I'm not going to lie, Margaret, those always make me so nervous when I can't see what was actually drawn up in the syringe or what was put in the bag, but I'm the one that has to give it.
And the flip side of that is if you are mixing up, let's say, ampicillin, and the bedside nurse is actually doing the dilution and the drawing up of the medication, so especially if you're not drawing up the whole vial, that's where I feel that the nurse would come into responsibility for the medication. So I think it comes down to is who's drawing it up, how is it to be administered, and were there any checks in the calculations? So I think that those are the important things to consider. I don't know if James has anything else that given he works in the emergency department where it's
a whole different world down there.
Agreed. Whole different world. It's really interesting. I would agree with Margaret. I think it comes down to, nurses need to be responsible. It's always great to have a double check, and be aware, read something a second time, but nurses really need to be responsible for nursing action. What we do, and again, because, we mentioned it above, kind of nurses taking on so many hats. When nurses are 40 to 50% of your workforce, it's very easy to say, well, I only have 5 pharmacists, or I only have in the ED today 5 ED physicians, all day, rotating in and out down there. Well, the nurses need to step up because you have 20 nurses, so there's many more of them to follow up on their action. The training, the educational, there's all different levels when you start comparing the different disciplines. So asking nursing specifically to be a double check for some of these other specialties is maybe kind of a leap, maybe a step out of what their training, their education is. or just simply is it the right person because they have a different job, a different role. So everyone needs to take ownership of their own part in the process. But it's just very easy to ask a nurse because they are so prolific when compared to all of these other individuals that are staffed at much lower volume.
So how can our healthcare organizations, our healthcare leaders, how can they help with improving these processes and reporting of errors?
From my perspective, as an immediate healthcare professional, is listening to your frontline staff and making a commitment to providing what the frontline staff needs. And yes, there is a nursing shortage. However, there have been a number of nurses who have left for the profession for different reasons, and correcting the reasons that they left may entice them to come back to nursing. And I think that needs to be a huge commitment on administration. And I'm not really saying the frontline administrators, because I think I give our nurse managers and even the directors a lot of leeway and credence, because they're dealing with what's on top. So they may not be getting a budget where they're allowed to hire enough nurses or give them the wages and benefits that nurses need. So I think that is the one thing. And also a commitment. Years ago in pediatrics in the area I practice in, we drew up our own potassium. That was, we had the vials, we drew up our own potassium. And then at another institution, not the institution I was at, there was a serious fatal mistake. And we know potassium is one of those drugs where it can be. Mm-hmm. Once that happened, every pediatric institution that I have worked at or have friends at, even in the ED, pharmacy must draw up the potassium and dilute it. Now, this is in pediatrics, but even in our pediatric emergency departments, that was a process that was set down in stone. And I'll be honest, I've called a number of pharmacy a couple of times and go, I need that potassium. I need that potassium. I have to choose. I'm like, give me the potassium, then give me the ampicillin. But that's just my perspective from the front line.
I would agree with Margaret, and I would simply add one of the things I try to do from a director standpoint is make life easier for nurses. Now, that's a very broad statement, but we know there's a shortage, so the demands are higher. We know that they wear many, many hats. So what can we do? What does their charting look like? Do they have a lot of paperwork and stuff? What are the steps, to draw blood, to send things off? The things that they do every day for every patient, take those tasks, break them down. How long does it take? How many steps do you have to walk to do them? Where are your supplies? And if you can start to trim off a minute here, 3 minutes there, 5 minutes there, and if I can give a nurse back 10, 15, 20 minutes per patient, well, not only does the patient get out of there faster and we can see more patients, but the nurse is faster and has a chance to stop. Do exactly what Margaret says. Work with pharmacy. Make sure we get the proper medications, the high-risk treatments that we do. So it really is from a retention, recruiting, try to get nurses back. Let me show you what we're doing to make your life easier. And That's not always easy. That steps on a lot of toes from time to time. A lot of health systems or hospitals have very set in place, hey, we've done it this way. We've always done it this way. And no one's ever questioned that. So I think today, as you move forward, you just have to have a questioning attitude and be able to try to figure out what you can do, make life easier, but it gives the staff from all aspects more time. And if you have more time, you can focus, you can spend that time concentrating when you really need to, and it all comes back to it prevents errors. And that's really what we're about, providing great care and preventing errors.
What I think I've heard from both of you in different ways is advocating for your staff. And a lot of times I think leadership advocates behind the scenes. And part of that unhappy atmosphere that you have, they don't care about me type culture in departments, is that they don't know that behind the scenes the leader is advocating. So do you think it's helpful for leaders who may be listening in to understand that it's important to share what you're doing behind the scenes in regards to advocating for a better workplace, a workflow?
Absolutely. Absolutely. To the extent that I can, I love to involve the frontline staff. I pull them into the meetings. We have work groups. We have updates. I have my own communication board that lists just things that we're working on. And it may not change one week, but the next week I may be able to add 3 or 4 things on it. And then I keep a list of achievements, list of accomplishments each year. And we just start labeling them out, what we can do, what we've accomplished, and then what we're still working. So that is a great platform when someone doesn't want to take 5 minutes or 10 minutes and put in an event report or incident report, hey, this may be an issue, or report it up. Part of my board is a dry erase board. They can come up there and say, hey, this medication won't scan. Great. That's all I need you to do. Tell me. I will be happy to follow up on that. I know that can be an error in waiting. Let me follow up on that, and I will chase that down. But it increases the communication between your frontline staff and your leadership to where they know now, I cannot walk through the hall without somebody saying, hey, did you know about so-and-so? And while I'll be frank, it overwhelms me at times, the amount of things. The reality is there's a rapport now where they know that we're going to get things done, okay? Because we have that two-way communication. Some people are a little harder to get involved than others, based off of their own personality and past experiences. But as they see things being fixed, at the end of the day, it creates more time for the nurses. We start to solve problems, and you know what? It's better patient care, and no one can argue with that.
Yeah, and Candace, I want to reiterate what James said: that administration helping to make sure that the systems that are in place to help the nurses actually work. Barcode scanning, the handheld scanners actually work. The machines that give you your medications, one type is called Pyxis, actually work and are programmed. That the electronic medical record system is up and running appropriately. And that if there's an issue, you get your other support staff, IT staff, and you don't say, well, don't worry about it and work around it, or we can't fix it for another 6 hours. If you give your frontline workers a system, you got to make sure it works too. And you got to be willing to take the feedback when it doesn't.
Absolutely, because we really don't want them doing the workarounds, because workarounds seem to become a habit. Hey, this doesn't work. So instead of reporting it, they use that workaround. So absolutely, I agree with that. Now we know errors are going to happen. So how do we support healthcare professionals when they do happen?
From a frontline perspective, I would say support, listening to all the facts, making sure that all the facts and the situation is taken into account. Let's talk about like transferring a patient, and a patient got injured. Well, the Hoyer lift was broken. Nobody reported it, and its routine maintenance wasn't done. And so a patient was injured. So I think that the support from leadership and making sure that their voices are heard and that it's the whole situation is looked at and not just immediate finger blaming.
Completely agree. I would simply add to that. I have experienced in my career where I have sat through a number of presentations where risk management or quality department will present, hey, this is a breakdown of our event reports, incident reports. And they'll say, and I'm just generalizing here, 62% are medication errors, X, Y, and Z. And it's a nice report, but you leave the meeting with, well, what are we doing with that data? What actionable task are we taking? And so from an organizational approach, how are we going to affect those numbers? Because if we don't actually take action, then the next year I'm going to sit through the same hour-long presentation, and we're going to sit up there and they're going to say, oh, well, this year we had 63% medication event total of everything. And so from a healthcare organization, there's got to be a conscious decision to use the reporting system that you have and act on it. And then when you act on it, advertise those changes. What improvements have you made? And be cognizant about the improvements, the process change. Don't add steps to people that don't have time to take on additional things, but look at reallocating who does what. Many times you don't have to add additional steps to somebody if you just change the process. It'll correct itself. So from an organization, getting involved and showing where they're taking action, and then the results, the positive results, year over year, those meetings become much more meaningful.
Absolutely. Now, we know that, like I said before, errors, they're going to happen. And I don't know if there's going to be a trend in the relationship to possible criminal suits like we saw this year. I do know there have been a few more lawsuits. I believe that most of them have been against nurses this year since that Tennessee lawsuit came out. So how do we as healthcare professionals protect ourselves moving forward?
That's a great question, Candace. So James and I have talked about, following procedures, following best practices. The other thing I want to say is that as nurses, we assume that our institution is behind us. 99.9% of the time they are, but we need to take a positive and proactive approach on how we are preventing and protecting ourselves. One way to do that is through malpractice insurance. Now, I know that there's debate about it, but when you sit down and you think about it, litigation is high. The cost of litigation can be high, no matter what the outcome is. Most nurses don't know what their hospital policies cover for them. And when you have healthcare insurance, though I will admit, depending upon what area you work at, it can be kind of expensive. You have somebody in your corner that is looking out just for you. Whereas the institution policy is looking out for the institution, the healthcare providers, everybody involved. And having someone that is really looking out for you and going to help you is really important, both from a cost perspective, because a lot of the policies will help cover the costs, and they will also help cover if the nurse is found negligent, what the cost of that is. And the other thing we need to remember is that sometimes lawsuits can occur by the time they work through the system later, and the nurse might have left the institution, and the malpractice policy of the institution may not cover them at that time. And if they work in a subspecialty such as pediatrics or OB, we can be, I can be named in a lawsuit from a child that I saw, 15 years ago, 3 employers ago. So that's just one way we can protect ourselves.
Now, I've heard a lot of mixed thoughts on malpractice insurance, from you should always carry it, never be without it, to you should never carry it because they'll find out you have malpractice insurance and then they'll sue you. So for healthcare professionals we don't actually require them to have malpractice insurance. They should carry that, correct?
I think so. Because my understanding is, and James, please correct me if I'm wrong, when they come up with the damages portion, they don't take that into account until they come up with the damages portion of a litigation. So they would have to already prove something has happened before they would know about the malpractice insurance of the individual. Am I correct, James?
Well, Alabama law, which is the only one that I can speak to, is a little bit unique in its practice, and our negligence is a joint and severable liability. And so, what that means is, in a lawsuit. So, when people ask me, and I think this would apply for everyone, but when people ask me, insurance or no insurance, what should a nurse do? My response is, it's really up to you. Because it's just a personal question. Many, many times nurses are listed in a complaint because a plaintiff knows, I know you're not the deep pocket. Okay, you're not the deep pockets here, but I want to investigate and depose and fact find and see what I can learn. In a deposition, one of the very first things that are asked is about your insurance. Do you have insurance? Who do you have it with? What's your policy number? Let me go find out. And all of that stuff will come out. The opposing attorney will go and call and figure out how much is there. So from the nurse on the front line, they have to decide, do I not want to carry insurance and think that I'm only being included in this lawsuit as a fact finding in order to go after deeper pockets? Or do I want to carry insurance and therefore I have money to go after and be included regardless in the lawsuit? So if you're resting your hat on, I may be kicked out because I don't have any insurance for the plaintiff to go after, then that's a pretty good gamble. That's a high risk gamble. So it's more likely that you should carry insurance. But again, it's a personal decision. But many, many times, because in Alabama, they'll keep you in the case, ask you about anything and everything under the sun. And what happens at the end of the trial is if there is a verdict, then the plaintiff can choose who they want to get it from. And so obviously whoever has the deeper pockets usually gets hit with that. So right, wrong, indifferent, that's kind of the law here. So, and that also brings up a point of wherever you practice nursing, you may want to read up on some of the laws, negligence and malpractice laws in those states and how things are handled not always easy to read, not always easy to find, but it may impact your decision on whether or not you should get insurance. The easy answer is, I worked really hard to go through school and get my license. And even though it may be expensive, it is a cost of doing business. And I would recommend that you carry insurance, especially in this day and age.
I was just about to ask where we could go to find resources to help us make that decision. So thanks for touching on that as well. So as we wrap up this series, what do you hope that the listeners are going to take away?
This case is that we've discussed, and kind of the fallout from it is the incident or the actual event, unfortunately, is not unique. Events like this occur all throughout healthcare. In a recent Press Ganey presentation, I saw the last reported number was something about 400,000 medical errors a year are reported. And I know different individuals report different numbers, but the crux of that number is that it's just an astounding number. And so we have got to address that. Everybody in their lifetime will need healthcare. Whether they receive it or not, they will need it. Many will need to be in a hospital for care. And we owe it to ourselves, our loved ones, our community, friends to provide great care. And so what can we do to provide that great care? And how do we go about reducing our error rate in a learning manner that is effective? And so that's where I would encourage hospital systems, hospitals, the individual leaders, in each department to really focus on addressing issues that you see. Address them, evaluate your processes, see what you can change. I'm very well aware that you cannot change 100% of them. But what if we changed 90% of what was wrong today? I mean, that is truly impactful and will save lives. And so at the end of the day, no matter your feelings about the verdict, this case, this lawsuit, we have got to really address how we can change and prevent errors moving forward.
I agree, Candace. And I think the individual nurse needs to do the best that they can to provide the highest quality of care. And to remember there are systems in place for a reason. If the system is not working, they need to report that to their leadership that system is not working, and to do what they can at the bedside to prevent errors as much as we can. But as we started it in the beginning, we're human. We're not robots. So we need to decrease them. Do I think we'll completely eliminate them? No.
As long as we have humans, we will have errors, right?
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Carno and Dr. Stowe, for joining me for this series.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I know this series has given me a better understanding of possible legal issues within healthcare. To our listeners, thank you for joining us for this final episode in our series where healthcare and legal meet. Through this series, we have discussed criminal and civil negligence, acknowledgement of mistakes, how culture affects our practice environments, and the changes in healthcare that are being seen after a criminal court found a Tennessee nurse guilty, and how to protect ourselves as healthcare professionals from possible litigation. You can keep your learning going by finding additional podcasts and other educational resources on elitelearning.com. This is Candace Pierce for Colibri Healthcare.
This podcast featured content from an accredited CE activity provided by Colibri Healthcare. Visit elitelearning.com/podcasts for accreditation and disclosure statements and instructions on how you may be able to earn CE credits. Take your learning to the next level by subscribing to more podcasts on compelling healthcare topics.